The moment I knew something was off was when Bryce McLaren, yes, the CEO's golden boy with a trust fund tan and a LinkedIn full of buzzwords, strolled into my meeting 10 minutes late, sipped his oat milk latte like he invented coffee, and called my expansion model charmingly outdated. Charming. Like he was describing a vintage soap dish, not the $300 million international rollout I'd spent 18 months assembling from dust and duct tape. I'd just finished presenting the Q3 roadmap, logistics, projected yields, risk contingencies, the whole brutal ballet, and the boardroom had gone quiet in that good way. The CEO, Gordon McLaren, nodded once. Subtle, but enough. I'd learned over the years that a single nod from Gordon meant you were safe for another quarter. Then Bryce's name appeared on the shared calendar like a bad rash. Strategic Growth Officer, it said. A title made up of 3 lies and a smirk. Fresh off consulting in London, the internal email read, which, loosely translated, meant spent 6 months failing upward while eating overpriced eggs at Soho House. Still, I wasn't worried. I'd survived 5 CFOs, 2 lawsuits, and a rogue avocado toast initiative from marketing. I could survive Gordon's spawn, or so I thought. Let me back up. I'm Linda M. Warren, Senior VP of Operations and the poor soul who turned a failing regional logistics division into a global expansion engine, bootstrapped, battle-tested, and blessed with a team that actually liked me. We weren't flashy. We were effective, and I made sure every signature on every partner deal was squeaky clean and time-stamped. So when Bryce, wearing $800 sneakers and daddy's approval, leaned back in his chair during that Monday touchpoint and interrupted me mid-sentence to say, "Your signature means nothing now, darling," I swear to God I momentarily forgot where I was. The whole room froze like someone had spilled a bottle of Merlot on the server rack. I laughed, loud enough to be mistaken for a joke, and when no one else joined in, I just nodded, said, noted, and closed my laptop. On the inside, I was tasting pennies. Listen, if you've made it this far into my story, do me one tiny favor. Tap that like button and subscribe. 90% of you forget, and it really keeps the team going, especially when we're dealing with spoiled man-children in $800 sneakers. Now, where was I? Right, the erasure. By Tuesday, I'd been reassigned to something called special projects. No clear goals, no team, no resources. Just a polite exile with a smiley face. My office was moved from the 14th floor down to 9, next to the printer room that smells like melted plastic and despair. My replacement? Bryce, or rather, the visionary leader of next-gen market engagement. He took over my expansion model, stripped it down to a PowerPoint of clip art and TikTok references, and rebranded it Operation Youngblood. I wish I were making that up. To the outside world, it looked like a promotion. It was now leading the charge into untapped youth markets in Southeast Asia. Inside the company, though, something started to rot. My vendors called me asking why their contracts had been amended. My own team began whispering about skipped approvals. Bryce canceled partner site visits and instead hosted brand resonance workshops with influencers who thought net margin was a tennis term. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. I said nothing. I did not complain to Gordon. I did not draft a memo or call a meeting or post a thinly veiled update on LinkedIn because I was waiting. Not in some metaphorical, spiritual, let the universe sort it out way. No, I was literally waiting for date, a clause, a name, something everyone else forgot I had. And when it came, it would hit harder than any latte-fueled tantrum that nepotism in sneakers could throw. He showed up 13 minutes late. 13. To a global expansion meeting with 3 VPs, 2 board observers, and the goddamn CFO on video from Singapore. Bryce McLaren walked in like he was arriving at Coachella, phone in hand, sunglasses still on, chewing some neon gum that smelled like regret and watermelon vape juice. I'd prepped the room. Binder packets distributed, talking points coordinated, data walls loaded. This meeting was supposed to be the milestone. Formal green light for Phase Roman 2. We were entering South Korea, Poland, and Chile in one coordinated leap. My logistics director had worked through a kidney infection to make sure every customs entry point was accounted for. I hadn't slept in 48 hours, and this boy man waltzes in, unbuttons his blazer, and goes, "We're pivoting." He didn't sit, just stood at the end of the conference table like he was auditioning to be the next host of Shark Tank and said, "We need to shed legacy thinking. Gen Z doesn't care about multi-channel ops. We need emotional velocity." Emotional velocity. I blinked. Thought maybe I was having a stroke. Then he picked up the binder I'd handed out, 200 pages of legal-ready agreements, profit projections, risk tiers, and tossed it. Actually tossed it like a frisbee. It slid halfway down the polished wood table before catching the edge of the CMO's coffee and knocking it all over the attendance log. "This," he said, gesturing to the wet, crumpled pages, "isn't strategy, it's nostalgia." There was a pause, you know the kind. The one where no one knows if they should laugh or call HR. And then, without even looking at me, he said it. "Your signature means nothing now, darling. I'll take it from here." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just sat there, palms flat on the table, watching the CFO's face go dead white like he'd just watched a train derail in slow motion. He wasn't wrong about the signature part. not entirely. I wasn't on the new delegation chart Bryce had slipped into the last board packet. I wasn't listed as project lead anymore. I wasn't listed at all. Gordon said nothing, just stared at the monitor like if he looked hard enough. It might pixelate Bryce out of existence. By the end of the day, my nameplate was removed from the expansion war room. A new Slack channel popped up, Op YB exec, and I wasn't invited. My badge access to the 14th floor was revoked, and by 4:17 p.m., I received a meeting request from HR titled, Transition to Special Projects. The email read like a condolence card. My new office was a glorified storage closet on 9. No windows, one filing cabinet locked, no key. They didn't fire me. That's not how these people operate. They sideline you, paint you in strategic ambiguity, keep you on payroll so they can deny retaliation, and pray you'll resign on your own so they don't have to pay severance. But I didn't resign. I didn't argue either. I signed the transition memo. I shook hands with Bryce. He gave me a fake smile and said, "You're still part of the team, Linda. Just supporting from a different angle." I wanted to ask him if that angle was behind a fax machine. Instead, I told him I was looking forward to redefining what support meant. Then I shut the door behind me, opened my old laptop, and pulled up an email from 2018. It was from Gordon. Attached was a PDF titled Proxy Transfer Agreement LMW. I opened it, read it, reread it, and then I smiled, because I knew something Bryce didn't. His house of influence was built on sand, and I was the goddamn tide. 3 weeks into my exile, and Bryce was already breaking things faster than the interns could update the damage in Arable. Partner timelines collapsed. Supplier pricing escalated. He pitched a new hyperlocal influencer strategy in Vietnam using a YouTuber who didn't even speak Vietnamese. And yet, the board just smiled and nodded, high on buzzwords and Bryce's unearned confidence. I kept my head down, mostly. The thing about being banished to special projects is you gain an unusual kind of invisibility. No one checks in, no one micromanages. They just assume you're off somewhere alphabetizing old roadmaps or quietly Googling retirement plans. Meanwhile, you can start noticing, like how Bryce's new market relaunch involved canceling 4 long-standing vendor contracts quietly. One of those vendors, Cole Spence, had been with us since the Indonesia pilot. He was scrappy, loyal, and knew which customs officers could be bribed with a single bottle of Johnny Walker. So when I saw his name vanish from the portal, I scheduled lunch. We met at the kind of downtown place that serves $17 sandwiches and pretends not to know what ranch dressing is. Cole looked tired. That wasn't normal. His eyes scanned the dining room like someone was going to serve him a subpoena between courses. "They didn't just terminate Linda," he said, poking at his kale. "They redlined our agreement, backdated it, inserted a clause saying we breached on fulfillment delays." "You didn't breach," I said. I knew his logistics numbers better than he did. He nodded. "Exactly. But they manufactured it." I tried to push back and legal ghosted me. Then someone named Kayla. Never met her, sent a closure letter with language that looked like it came from a law school group chat. He passed me a copy. I scanned it. My name removed from the chain entirely. Bryce's initials typed, not signed, at the bottom. "Let it go," he said, almost pleading. "Whatever this is, it's not just a business move. He's playing for something else, something bigger." I didn't respond. I just folded the paper and tucked it into my coat pocket. Back at the office, I started reviewing internal updates like a librarian reading between redacted lines. Project milestones had stopped aligning with procurement reports. Someone had approved a $1.2 million brand activation event in Bangkok with no vendor listed. And then there were the whispers. "He's positioning himself." He met with the investors again, alone. Gordon's been unusually quiet. Then one morning, I stepped into the elevator with Sharon, one of the board's quiet heavyweights. Always polite, rarely chatty. She glanced at me, then said, "Bryce seems to be rushing towards something big." I played dumb. Expansion's always been fast-paced. She raised an eyebrow. "It's not expansion when you're skipping protocols." The elevator dinged and she stepped out without looking back. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat in my sad little office, and pulled up the old email chain again, the one from 2018. Folder marked personal, do not forward. There it was, proxy transfer agreement. Signed, scanned, PDF'd. A moment of rare clarity from Gordon back when he trusted me more than he trusted his legal team. I'd asked for it not out of ambition, but because we were forming a separate fundraising entity at the time and he didn't want delays. "Just keep things moving," he'd said. The clause was ironclad. I was the proxy holder. Irrevocable, meaning I had control. Legal, operational, and financial. Over the dormant shell they were now trying to resurrect for the upcoming $500 million round. Meaning Bryce had been flexing muscles on a skeleton he didn't even own. I stared at it. I didn't print it. I didn't forward it. I just sat there, sipping my wine, reading that signature like it was a prophecy written in ink and hubris. I didn't act, not yet. Let the boy build his empire. The higher the tower, the better the collapse. Bryce had this habit. He'd take over meetings he wasn't invited to, then act like everyone else was late. The compliance prep session for the funding round was supposed to be a closed-door check-in between finance, legal, and operations. I was technically none of those anymore. But old calendar invites die hard, and no one had bothered to remove me, so I showed up. The conference room was cold, humming with tension and recycled air. The CFO, Michael, was flipping through a deck labeled Funco Structure Draft 3. On page 12, a new org chart appeared, and there it was, bold and bulletproof. Controlling Officer, Bryce McLaren. I tilted my head. That couldn't be right. Gordon wasn't even on the page, and I sure as hell knew Bryce hadn't filed any of the paperwork necessary to claim control. You don't just slap your name on a fundraising entity managing $500 million. That's the kind of thing the SEC tends to frown on. The rest of the room nodded politely. Compliance confirmed they were fast-tracking sign-offs. Michael mentioned needing signatory confirmations by end of week. Someone joked about using DocuSign on a yacht. I didn't laugh. I just stared at that line on the slide. After the meeting, I didn't go back to my office. I went down to the legal archive room. Dusty, unmonitored, and full of answers. I pulled every filing related to Funco Holdings, the shell company Bryce was claiming to lead. Took about 6 minutes. Bryce's name wasn't listed anywhere. Mine was, 3 places, listed as proxy holder, officer in absence, and emergency signatory, every box that mattered. Gordon's signature appeared in blue ink on every document. Clear as day, no amendments, no revocations. I leaned back in the creaky archive chair and exhaled through my nose. Isn't joy? It wasn't even relief, it was something sharper. Control. But control means nothing if no one recognizes it. I needed clarity. And I needed a witness. So I booked a lunch with Alan Bergstrom, our longtime external counsel. Neutral territory. A booth at Granger's Steakhouse, the kind of place where deals are whispered and receipts are never itemized. Alan arrived 10 minutes late, wearing the same rumpled suit he always wore when he smelled blood. I handed him the folder across the table without a word. He opened it, scanned the document slowly, then stopped cold at the proxy clause. His brow furrowed. He looked up, mouth slightly open. Do they know you still hold this? No, I said, swirling the untouched whiskey in my glass. He flipped back a page, reread the section about funding control, then looked at me again, this time with something new in his eyes. Not concern, not warning, respect. He closed the folder and slid it back across the table. What's your play, Linda? I took my time before answering, the kind of pause that lets gravity settle into a conversation. Not sure yet, I said, which was a lie. I was sure, I just hadn't decided when. Alan leaned back. You could freeze the funding. Take the whole thing offline. I nodded. I could, or he said you could sit on it. Let him bury himself. Then decide what part of the funeral you want to attend. That made me smile. I closed the folder, tucked it into my bag, and stood to leave. Do me a favor, I said, adjusting my coat. Don't mention this to anyone, not yet. He gave me the same nod Gordon once did when I closed a deal in Jakarta with nothing but a handshake and a fax machine. You always did know when to wait. Outside, the city was buzzing. Taxis honking, sirens wailing, the normal heartbeat of corporate delusion. But in my chest, silence, total focus. Bryce was accelerating towards something he didn't understand, and I was the curve in the road he couldn't see coming. By Thursday morning, Bryce was scheduling emergency funding calls like he was trying to sell raffle tickets at a PTA carnival. One after another, back-to-back investor briefings, fireside syncs, and what he proudly labeled a capital conviction blitz. Even had someone from marketing mock up a PowerPoint with fake term sheets and placeholder investment tiers, color-coded like a crayon box. Momentum is everything, he kept saying. Momentum is also how you skid off cliffs. He booked a last-minute core investor pre-call for Friday afternoon, said it was crucial, said the window was tight, said he was the one they trusted. The invite list was so stacked I thought for a second he might be trying to IPO the company from a Zoom call. I wasn't on the list. But Michael, the CFO, was. We crossed paths outside the conference room just before it started. He looked pale, even for a man who averaged 4 hours of sleep and 3 espressos a day. He leaned in, voice low. He's pushing through term confirmations, Michael said. Claims we've already got soft commitments, but I haven't seen a single binding LOI. Did you tell him that? I asked. Michael nodded, jaw tight. He told me to focus on the math and let family handle the vision. I blinked. He actually said family? 3 times, Michael muttered, like he's in a mob movie. Bryce wasn't just improvising, he was rewriting the script in crayon and demanding an Oscar. After the call, I looped in someone I hadn't spoken to since the reorg, Sierra Meachem Arku. Sierra was no nonsense, military sharp. The kind of woman who once told a supplier their shipment delay made her physically itch. She'd been quiet lately, too quiet. We met in the stairwell between floors where no one ever installed cameras. I brought a printout of Bryce's last 6 internal approvals. She brought hers. Took us 9 minutes to find the first forgery. Signature on this partner memo is his father's, she said, but the date stamp doesn't match. Gordon was in Geneva that day. We found 3 more like it. All for small things, partner extensions, budget reallocations, contract renewals, but they created a paper trail. One that made it look like Bryce had full operational control. He didn't. Worse, it looked deliberate. You think he's prepping for something? I asked. Sierra narrowed her eyes. He's manufacturing retroactive authority. He's either bluffing hard or he thinks he's untouchable. I looked at the wall, then back at her, or both. That night, I went back to my apartment, lit a candle out of habit, and pulled out my folder. I reviewed the proxy one more time. Every word, every clause, it still held. Then I opened my phone and called a number I hadn't used in over a year, Maya, the assistant to our lead investor at Ravel Capital. She answered fast. That alone told me Bryce had been circling. Linda, Maya, hi, this is just a courtesy call. A pause, that sounds ominous. I smiled. Monday's funding call, Bryce will open with a vision deck. He'll talk about new verticals, next-gen partners, expanded markets. Okay, before you get into any commitments or feedback, I said calmly, ask him one question. Maya waited, didn't speak. Ask him, I said, who holds the irrevocable proxy for Fundco. There was another long pause, then softly, and what will he say? Doesn't matter, I replied. The answer isn't him. She exhaled through her nose, a quiet knowing sound. Noted, I hung up, closed my laptop, and leaned back in my chair. There was no adrenaline, no righteous fury, just the slow, cold tick of a countdown clock. Let him pitch, let him lie, let him think he'd won. The email came through a burner inbox, a former intern turned consultant who owed me more than a few favors. Subject line was just heads up, no greeting, no pleasantries, just a PDF attachment and a single sentence. He booked the yacht for Sunday, post-funding celebration, a 93-foot charter in Marina del Rey. Open bar, branded merch, a custom cake shaped like the company logo with a little fondant Bryce on top. Scheduled before Monday's call had even happened. The arrogance was so dense it had gravitational pull. I stared at it for a minute, then shut the laptop. He was celebrating a deal that wasn't his to close, so I stayed late that Friday. Not just working late, midnight toil, lights off, ghost office late. Everyone else had cleared out hours ago. The janitor gave me a sad wave and a knowing look as he passed. I nodded back like a widow at a mafia funeral. I lit a cinnamon-scented candle in my corner office, one tiny act of rebellion HR hadn't caught yet, and opened a document I hadn't touched since Jakarta, the original fundraising shell's governance file. Then I attached it to a memo addressed to Alan, our outside counsel. Subject, urgent, proxy confirmation for board distribution, only the body was simple. Bulletproof. One paragraph confirming that the irrevocable proxy granted to me in 2018 remained intact, unchallenged, and legally enforceable under the company's own bylaws. No drama, no accusations, just the truth. At the bottom I wrote, please prepare to confirm upon investor request. Proxy activation to commence Monday, 9 a.m. ET. I encrypted it, sent it. Then I closed my eyes and sat back in my chair, letting the silence flood in like water through a crack in a dam. There's a kind of calm that only comes when the trap's been set and all that's left is gravity. Just after 10 p.m., I heard him. Bryce, he didn't walk in. He strolled like a man who'd just won the lottery with a scratch-off and was already pricing yachts of his own. He saw the light on under my door and poked his head in, still wearing that smug Boy King expression like it was part of his skincare routine. Linda, he said, in that voice people usually reserve for calling a cat that doesn't like them. Burning the midnight oil for your little pet projects? I didn't respond. He stepped inside, leaned against the doorframe like a stock photo of relaxed confidence. You know, he continued, you've had a good run. No hard feelings, but this next phase, it's bigger than any one person, especially legacy folks. Still, I said nothing. Just kept typing, he chuckled. Trying to stay relevant, Linda, that got me. I looked up, met his eyes, calm as stone, and said, Monday's going to be memorable. He froze for half a second, just long enough for his eyebrows to flicker. And he laughed again, louder this time, forced. Sure. I'm sure they'll appreciate whatever insight you bring from the copy room. He left without closing the door. I stared at the flickering candle until the flame wavered, then blew it out. Before leaving, I opened my phone and created a new calendar reminder. Irrevocable Proxy live activation time, 8:59 a.m. ET location. Zoom, I selected a single notification, 1 minute before. And I turned off the lights, grabbed my coat, and walked out, past the empty offices, past the framed photos of the leadership team that still had my face cropped from the edge, past the echoing stairwell that used to smell like ambition and now just smelled like reheated failure. The storm was already spinning. He just hadn't felt the wind yet. Monday morning arrived like a loaded gun on the desk. The Zoom call lobby was already filling when I logged in. Ravel Capital, Eastwood Group, Renly Partners. Heavy hitters, old money, fast money, stupid money. You could practically hear the hedge fund cologne through the screen. I watched their little name tiles blink on one by one, digital bloodhounds eager for a whiff of the next big thing. Bryce joined 5 minutes early. That was his tell when he was really trying to impress people. He showed up before the clock. His video popped on with him already mid-laugh, fake relaxed, wearing that navy blue suit he always wore when he wanted to look like a man instead of a boy playing one. Behind him was one of those virtual backdrops meant to look like a Manhattan office, but with lighting so off it made his forehead glow like a lava lamp. Gordon joined right after. The CEO, the father, the man who once told me loyalty is the last currency that never devalues. He looked older than usual. Pale, tired, like something was already bothering him and he didn't know yet that it was me. Alan, our external counsel, joined dead last. Video off, mic muted. The only sign of life was his name, floating quietly in the lower left corner like a loaded trapdoor. Then Bryce took the mic. He launched into the presentation like it was his Grammy speech, buzzwords firing like buckshot, charts flying by at light speed. Market penetration. Youth-centric verticals. Brand-first monetization. At one point, he used the phrase empathy-forward disruption, which I'm pretty sure he stole from a podcast hosted by someone who owns too many rings. Then came the digs. Of course, under previous leadership, we were stuck in a somewhat linear mindset. A pause, a fake chuckle. But as we say in the new strategy office, legacy lanes are for traffic, not innovation. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, camera on, expression neutral, watching the tiles shift like tectonic plates. Then Maya, the lead investor's assistant, passed the mic to her boss, Marcus Renly. Quiet guy, mid-60s, speaks like every word costs him money. He leaned slightly forward on screen, adjusted his glasses, and said it with the softness of a sniper. Just to clarify, who holds the irrevocable proxy for the funding vehicle? Silence. Not polite silence. Not the kind that comes after applause. The kind of silence that grows legs and walks around the room, checking for exits. Bryce blinked, twice. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like he was buffering. He turned toward Gordon. Dad does right? Gordon didn't answer. Instead, his eyes locked on Alan's name in the corner of the screen like it was a ticking bomb. And that's when Alan finally unmuted. The sound of him clearing his throat cut through the call like a scalpel. Actually, he said, voice level, calm, the proxy was transferred in 2018. Legally binding, not revoked. As of this morning, control rests with Linda Warren. 20 tiles on the screen and not one of them moved. The CFO froze. The COO looked down. Maya tilted her head slightly, like she'd just heard her favorite line in a courtroom drama. Bryce stared at his father like the betrayal had only just now registered in his rich boy brain. I didn't say a word, not yet. Let the weight settle, let the silence choke. This wasn't the climax. This was just the breath before the final blow. I waited exactly 3 seconds after Alan dropped the bomb before I unmuted. Thank you, Alan, I said, tone neutral, almost bored, like I was commenting on the weather, not detonating a legacy. To clarify for the record, the irrevocable proxy was transferred to me in October 2018. Signed directly by CEO Gordon McLaren. Not time-limited, not conditional. It has not been revoked. My voice didn't shake, didn't rise. I'd practiced it 100 times in my head on the treadmill in the car, even once while chopping onions. Every word delivered with the precision of a scalpel, not the blunt force of revenge. I clicked share screen. The document opened like a guillotine. Strategic freeze order pending audit review. Effective immediately, all activities, expenditures, public-facing announcements under Funco Holdings are to be suspended. No new partnerships, funding confirmations, or market entries shall proceed without internal audit clearance. Signed, Linda M., Warren Proxy Holder Funco Holdings, LLC. I didn't look at Bryce. I didn't need to. My eyes scanned the investors instead, Marcus, Maya, the Renly team, Eastwood, Ravel Capital. All of them reading, all of them deadly still. Investors don't react like civilians. They don't gasp, they don't fumble, they go silent. Because when the money stops moving, everything else freezes with it. Finally, Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, rubbed his jaw once, and nodded slowly. That satisfies our requirement, he said. We're pausing the deal until the proxy holder's audit is complete, not Bryce's audit. Mine, that was the shift, subtle, cataclysmic. Bryce's camera flickered like he was about to speak, then died. He came back on with a shaky connection, trying to scramble. I wasn't made aware of, Dad, did you? Gordon didn't say a word. His face was pale, expression unreadable. Just the faint, bitter curve of a man realizing the air he bet the farm on had walked into a buzzsaw wearing cologne. Bryce turned toward me on screen, eyes wild. Linda, we've been prepping this for months. This undermines the entire. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. You mean the part where you falsified approval signatures and hosted unauthorized vendor meetings under a name you don't legally control? I said, tilting my head slightly. That part? He shut his mouth. The board camera feeds were quiet, too quiet. That special, suffocating corporate silence that comes when the air gets ripped out of the room and everyone's waiting to see whose body hits the floor first. The lead counsel, Alan, spoke one last time. I'll circulate the freeze order to the full board and legal by noon. Linda, we'll coordinate with you on audit scope. I nodded once. Thank you. I clicked stop share. Then I reached for my coffee, room temp now, bitter perfect, and took a sip like I had nowhere else to be. Bryce's image shrank down in the corner of the screen. Smaller, powerless. I watched his face twitch, watched the tiny crack appear in the mask he'd worn since the day he arrived. The Boy King suit, the startup swagger, the mouth that never shut. It was all slipping. Because for the first time in his life, someone had taken the sword out of his hand without raising their voice. And he had no idea what to do with the silence. The audit didn't whisper, it roared. It started with a single flag transaction, a vendor payment marked advisory retainer, routed through a shell company that didn't exist until 6 weeks ago. That thread, once tugged, unraveled everything. Meetings that were never logged. Vendor changes that bypassed procurement. A $200,000 engagement fee to a brand consultancy run by Bryce's old college roommate, one who, according to LinkedIn, was currently hiking across Patagonia and off-grid. Within 72 hours, the compliance team compiled a preliminary report. 17 deviations from standard approval chains, 9 forged or unverifiable signatures, 2 undisclosed side deals with third-party logistics firms, both of which had pending lawsuits in Singapore. And Bryce, not one documented right to execute any of it. The board called an emergency session. Cameras off, voices low. No laughter, no spin, no vision talk, just numbers, facts, digital receipts, and a very quiet PDF titled Interim Proxy Activation Legal Memorandum, certified. By the end of the session, motion to suspend Bryce passed unanimously. He wasn't fired yet, but his badge stopped working by noon. The yacht party photos mysteriously disappeared from Instagram. The real twist, though, was Gordon, removed as chair. It was clean, surgical. Someone on the governance committee pointed out his failure to disclose the proxy, his silence during the funding call, and his apparent intentional withholding of material governance documents. I didn't have to say a word. I just sat there, arms crossed, watching the dominoes fall. Gordon didn't protest, didn't even lift his head. He just sat there, blinking slowly, the image of a man realizing the empire he built had quietly changed architects while he was still sketching towers in the sand. They offered me the reins, full control of Funco, expansion back under my leadership, budget reinstated. I declined. I built the machine, I said. Let someone else drive it. I've got other work now. But I made one request, that my name be restored on all founding documents, deal records, and governance logs. Not for ego, for clarity, for truth. 2 days later, the updated investor memo went out. Title, Funding Restructure and Proxy Update, final line, clean and unbolded. Proxy holder, Linda M. Warren, that's all it said. It didn't need to scream. At the end of the week, I walked past the executive floor just once, slow and deliberate. Through the glass, I caught sight of him, Bryce, packing up his office. No suit, just a hoodie, pale and sunken-eyed, moving like someone who'd aged 10 years in 10 days. He picked up a desk photo of himself and his father on some ski trip, stared at it for a long time, then dropped it face down into the box. As I passed, I heard him ask it, not me, not anyone in particular, just the air. How the hell did she do that? No one answered. The only sound was the click of my heels down the hall. The same hallway he once strutted through like he owned it. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I'd waited. I'd watched. And when the time came, I didn't scream, I just signed. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.